Welcome to the Valley Today, a public service presentation of KAIL-TV. We continue our visit with Joe Collins in the radio and television business for 50 years. Stay tuned for The Joe Show. It's all next on the Valley Today. Welcome to the Valley Today. We're back with our old friend Joe Collins talking about all the radio and rock and roll stars that he met. We're living vicariously through him. Joe, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
And we're going to talk about how you got into radio.
Let's pick it up in October of 1956. I was in the 5th grade, 10 years old, and my parents were going to take a trip back to Minnesota for like a family reunion for my father's family. And so my teacher said, you know, the time out of school, it'll do them more good to see the country than it would in the classroom. So we took off during the World Series of 1956 when the Brooklyn Dodgers and the Yankees played. That was the series where Don Larson pitched the perfect game. So we're going across the country. We go to Las Vegas the first day. You know, we're driving in a brand new 56 Buick Special station wagon, and they're letting me kind of control the radio. So I'm putting on the pop stations, and I heard all this great music: Bill Doggett, Little Richard, Fats Domino, Screamin' Jay Hawkins. And so when I got back from our trip to Minnesota, I went down, and I didn't have a 45 player. I had a 78.
Were these guys that were on local radio stations, or were they?
These were artists. These are artists I'm talking about. These are and Bill Doggett had Honky Tonk, and Fats Domino had My Blue Heaven, and Little Richard did Long Tall Sally, and Screamin' Jay Hawkins did I Put a Spell on You, and the original Louie Louie by Richard Berry came out then, and so the rhythm and blues really caught my fancy. So when I got back, it was later October, I went down to Brown's Music Store on Higuera Street in San Luis Obispo, and they had a couple of those. I think they had Little Richard in stock, but I bought them on 78 because I didn't have a 45 yet.
You could get them on 78.
Yeah, and so about the first year and a half of my record collection was all on 78. I had Elvis on 78, Fats,
really?
A lot of Little Richard.
I knew that they were on 45.
No, but they were still making 78s.
But I didn't know they were making 78s.
And it was like I think it was $1.03 for a 78, and you could buy a 45 for like 93 cents.
A 78 was an album?
No, it was a single. But it was a 78 RPM and two-sided. Just two-sided, just like buying a 45, but it was on 78.
Oh, wow.
And so, and I wish I still had those because I would be very rich.
So you didn't keep the records that you collected?
My mother threw those out when I went down to get my FCC license in 1965, and they moved. And so she threw out my baseball cards and all my 78s. So she just thought, well, he doesn't play them anymore. They're junk.
So in 65, you were what?
19.
19 years old, and you went to go get your FCC first class?
Yeah, down in Los Angeles to Ogden's Radio School in Burbank.
Yeah. But
1956, we get back, and my first records went something kind of like this.
He saw Aunt Mary coming and he ducked back in the alley, baby. When Wilbur will call, and even if night, I hurry to mine. Please, yeah, boy. You never know how much I love you. Never know how much I care. When you put your arms around me, I get a feeling that's so hard to bear. You give me fever. I put a spell on you. Because you're mine.
Okay, so we get back and I start buying a record a week with my allowance. And this was in the 5th grade, and I did that all through high school. I bought myself a new record, one a week, unless if I got, money for Christmas, then I go out and buy several of them. But I kept adding to my record collection week after week after week, all the way through the rest of grammar school, junior high school, and high school. Then I got into radio when I was a senior in high school, and I started getting a lot of records sent to me free disc jockey copies, and so then my record collection really exploded. And so we'll fast forward through junior high. We're listening, my buddy Steve Rude down the street and I used to listen to the distant stations.
Well, didn't you have a little pirate radio station?
I had a little pirate radio station that Steve helped me build because he was really good.
What, you got that from the back of a matchbook cover?
I know, I got that. I bought that through Montgomery Ward's, through the Montgomery Ward's catalog. It was called a Baby Talk transmitter. I think it was $19.95.
Baby Talk transmitter.
And you would put it in a baby's room, and then you could tune it to like 1580 to 1600, 1610, and you could adjust whatever frequency you wanted it to be on. Then you would tune the radio in the kitchen or another part of the house so a young mother could hear her baby if it was crying or something, and it was a way to monitor
5
the baby.
watts of power?
Oh, I don't even think it was a watt. But he pulled some resistors out, and we hooked it up to like the screen on the window.
And what was the name of this? What was the name of this set again?
It was called the Baby Talk transmitter.
Baby Talk transmitter.
Yeah, it was through Montgomery Ward's.
And it was just it was the original baby monitor that you could get and then tune your AM radio to it.
We pulled a resistor out, so it made it a little bit stronger, and then it took a wire and made an antenna to where you hooked to the window screen, which kind of boosted the signal. So you could pick up my station, 5 blocks away, and I would play the hits. And I had radio station jingles I would stole from KEWB in Oakland, and so my station was KEWB, only it was in San Luis Obispo. But we would run home from school in the afternoon, and you could pick up the distant stations. We listened to KRLA, KAFY in Bakersfield, and K-Day out of Los Angeles that had Alan Freed, who had come out from New York in 1960, and Art Leboe. And so the early disc jockeys really influenced me, the guys in the major markets, because radio in San Luis was awful. It was Squaresville.
So some of the early DJs that had a impact on you, you've got a montage.
I've got a montage. Shall we play it?
Play it.
All right, let's play it.
Lloyd Price, and who could have told you? You're tuned to K-Day, your better music station.
Hi, this is Art Leboe with the oldies but goodies, the best of the brand new and the currently popular. And we're on K-Day, the station that specializes in music and lots of it.
Marvin Gaye, that is too much. Here's guy before that, number 30, Darlene Love, Wait Till My Bobby Gets Home. 3 minutes past 3 o'clock from Bobby Dale and KWB as we continue another hour of the unveiling.
Hey, Mommy-o, hey, Daddy-o, this is your astronaut, Roscoe, your host with the most, your KDI ace. I just got back from outer space and great Kosovo. How do you do?
This is the real Don Steele, mighty leader of KEWB country, with this important warning.
Yes?
Write Tina Delgado is alive on the side of your super heterodyne receiver right away without bail. And stand by for further orders. That's all for now.
Hurrah! You digging old Wolfman Jack, baby, here on a nice night.
KRLA, serving Greater Los Angeles from Pasadena.
All AM.
All AM.
Yeah.
So what we just heard was Alan Freed from 1960 on K-Day on Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Art Leboe from 1960 on K-Day.
Art
Leboe owns Coke, and he's still on the air. He's been on the air since about 1948.
Wow.
He owns Coco 94 here in Fresno.
He's been on the air for 60 years.
He's been on the air a long time. So we used to listen to Art on K-Day in Los Angeles, and I think they went off at sunset back in those days.
Yeah.
But
they didn't broadcast 24.
I don't think they were 24 hours a day then, but we used to get them real well in the afternoons in San Luis. Then my mentor, the guy who was the defining moment for me, Bobby Dale, when he was on KEWB in Oakland from 1963. I'm driving home from a battle of the bands, the Battle of the Surf Bands in 1962. It's December, a rainy night, and I left, about 11:30 because the band I was involved with, they'd already played, and then there was another band, and it was going to wind down about 12:30. But I left about 11:30. And I'm driving home in my parents' 59 Ford Country Squire station wagon with the fake wood sides. And I'm having on KRLA out of Pasadena, and they played a song I always hated, "Hey Paula" by Paul and Paula, and I couldn't dial out of the station.
Hey,
yeah,
Paula.
I always hated that song. So I dialed over to KFWB, and because it was raining, the conditions were right, they boomed in that night, and for the first time, I heard Bobby Dale, and I realized that we weren't in Kansas anymore.
Where was Bobby Dale?
On KFWB, Channel 98 in Los Angeles. And so I heard him, and I realized, whoa, it was a very magic moment for me. And I go, I'm going to get my own radio show. And a year and a month later, I was on the radio.
But to have a radio show, you had to be a first class. Had to have a first class ticket, or you had to have an engineer with you.
You had to have a third class license to take transmitter readings every half hour back in those days. You had to take
as a jock.
As a jock,
you would take transmitter readings and do your show.
And do my show.
Yeah.
And to work at the big stations, you had to have a first class license, which I got in 1965. But to get my foot in the door, I got my third class license with the broadcast endorsement.
First class license had to be monumental.
Oh, I went to school. I went to school for 8 weeks, and there's a lot of math, a lot of calculus, and I went to school 7 days a week to do it. But I really wanted it, and I got it.
I think out of all these jocks that we just listened to, that montage, Wolfman Jack is probably the most recognizable to younger people.
Wolfman, yeah, because he was on so many stations, and he did the midnight special, The Real Don Steele, which we heard from KEWB in Oakland, and then he went to KHJ in Los Angeles with another guy who worked at K-Make in Fresno, Robert W. Morgan. They all ended up at KHJ in Los Angeles, Boss Radio. He had Boss Radio here in Fresno, which started here in Fresno. Fresno was kind of like the birthplace of the Boss Radio format. But The Real Don Steele, Frank Terry, who worked at K-Make, Tom Mall, who worked at K-Make, Ron Jacobs, who was the program director at K-Make, became the program director and one of the architects of Boss Radio in Los Angeles. A genius.
So these guys were playing, K-Make was playing Top 40?
K-Make was playing Top 40, but they were up against...
Was that what it was called then?
It was Top 40, yeah, and it was up against Kino, which was the bigger, more successful of the two stations.
Right. That was
but
the one
K-Make
that
had some good jobs.
Really bringing in the dollars.
Yeah, but Kino brought in the dollars, owned by Gene Chenault, and that was kind of the grandfather of Boss Radio, which became, countrywide. That format was in all the big markets, even the medium markets. But you also heard... Roscoe Mercer from KDIA,
where was KDIA at?
In Oakland. And that was from 1962. Roscoe went on to New York City, and he became the voice of ABC. And every half hour at the end of each show, he goes, "This is ABC." That was Roscoe Mercer's voice.
For the national feed?
For the national feed,
wow.
Yeah. The Real Don Steele, you heard. Wolfman Jack from XERB 1966. And then KRLA out of Pasadena, you heard the ID, which was the last piece we played.
Right.
KRLA was such a magic station. We grew up with 50,000 watts out of Pasadena. And that station had so many great jocks. They had Casey Kasem, who's in the America Top 40 Countdown.
Right.
They had Jimmy O'Neill, who did Shindig.
Shindig was a
TV show yeah.
also.
And
in the mid-'60s, right?
In the mid-'60s, 1964. And they brought the Beatles. The Beatles broke the song "I'm a Loser" on Shindig.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Playing live or
playing live on Shindig?
Syncing?
No, they weren't lip syncing. They were playing live.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow. You've been in broadcasting for 50 years?
Well, actually 48 and a half. But, I've been with my fake station, with my illegal station, that was in 1960.
Yeah.
So, over 50 years, broadcasting legally and illegally.
Yeah, you're a tenth of a watt.
Yeah, I was an outlaw.
Yeah. Well, there were some guys that did have pirate radio stations.
Yeah, well, I wasn't selling advertising, so I wasn't really breaking any laws.
Right.
And nobody ever stopped me,
Did you ever know anybody that had a pirate radio station? I mean, that had a formidable...
I knew a guy in Fresno that had a pirate station.
Yeah.
Out of his apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was he always changing the frequency, or how did he elude detection?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was an engineer, a really nice guy too.
Yeah.
Actually, I knew a couple of guys who had illegal radio stations in Fresno, but I don't want to give any names out or anything.
Well, you've got an impressive list here. And, the last time that we did a show on you, we talked about all these artists that you had met.
Let's go to...
And we had forgotten...
I left a bunch out.
We had mentioned... tell us about... You've got a funny story about Jimi Hendrix.
Okay, 1967. I'm with KFRC. I've been there about a year. KFRC in San Francisco, the Big 610, which was one of the Drake format stations, although it wasn't Boss Radio because there had already been Boss Radio on KEWB, and KYA at times called themselves the Boss of the Bay. But we were the big 610 and a very successful station. And, of course, everybody would come through that station. Summer of 66, it's June. And this guy comes in wearing all these really wild clothes, and he had electric hair. And they interview him because he's going to go play this rock festival down in Monterey that weekend. Nobody knew who he was. I've never heard of him. And I was helping record the interview and stuff. And I usually used to we had to wear ties to work. And that summer, it was starting to get a little looser. And so I was wearing a pair of bell bottoms and some Beatle boots. And I had on a white shirt. But instead of a tie, I'm wearing some love beads. And I had like a little Beatle mustache and stuff. And the guy finishes the interview. And he walks in to shake my hand for recording the interview. And he looks at my beads and goes, "Hey, man, nice beads." The guy was Jimi Hendrix. Nobody knew who he was. Because his resume had been, he had played backup with the Isley Brothers and played some dates with Little Richard. And that was it. And he played in bars in Seattle. So, and he'd been in the Army. He'd gotten out of the Army and he came back and started playing in the clubs. So he goes down to Monterey that weekend. And Monday, we break this new record on Reprise called Purple Haze. And by Monday, the whole world knew who Jimi Hendrix was. Also, while I'm at KFRC, later that summer, they bring in Colonel Harlan Sanders, who had just sold his franchise, I think for like $2 million or something. And he was a character.
They brought him in for an interview on KFRC?
Yeah. And he was up, and at that time he was like 88 years old already or something. Yeah. And just a funny old guy. Very used some very.
He had
salty,
a hickory cane, didn't he?
He walked with a cane. Always wore the white suit. Had the goatee, the white goatee, and he was. He wasn't like your grandfather. He was like a salty little guy, you know. Also later that summer, we went up to the Mark Hopkins Hotel and did an in his room, interviewed Jonathan Winters, who told some real interesting stories. Also, while I'm at KFRC, I met Robert F. Kennedy twice. Gerald Ford.
Was he coming through? Who was he coming through? Running for the 68 presidential race?
He was running for the 68 presidential race. He was a candidate, and he came through twice, and I met him. I met him one at a conference, and the other at a campaign appearance, and we were out covering him. And then also I met Gerald Ford 3 different times. I met President Reagan when he was our governor. Met Martin Luther King Jr. down at Stanford in late 1967.
Tell us about Martin Luther King.
Very, very peaceful, gentle man. I was surprised how he seemed smaller. You know, he didn't seem as big when you met him in person. You know, but he very gentle soul. You know, soft spoken. Met Sly Stone in the fall of '66.
Well, wasn't Sly Stone a DJ?
He was a very good No, he was on KSOL and then later KDIA, and he left KDIA because he had the Family Stone finally got so big. So
before the band took off, he was a DJ.
Yeah, but he had his band, but he was a DJ. He came out of Vallejo High School. He was in the drum corps. He was a drummer, and then he was also a studio engineer at Autumn Records, which was owned by Tom Donahue and Bob Mitchell in the Trident building there on Columbus, by North Beach.
Sly and the Family Stone was big.
Well, they were huge.
What, the early 70s?
No. They came out with Dance of the Music late 1967, and it really hit in 68. But like December 67 was when Dance of the Music came out, and he was by that time on KDIA. But when I met him, he was working the afternoon show on KSOL in San Francisco.
And that's a rags to riches to rags story because he came from a poor family and made quite a bit of money and then became poor again.
Yeah. And
from his own doing.
But a very, very talented guy.
Yeah.
Let's see. Continuing to Los Angeles, 1975, Gary Wright comes out with the Dreamweaver album. And he comes on as a guest on my show, and we spent like 3 hours together.
That's KTLA?
No, KMET.
Oh,
when I was at KMET on 94.7. That's where I also produced Flo and Eddie by the Fireside with Mark and Howard of the Turtles.
When you were kind of a pioneer because FM had just started coming on in the late 60s, early 70s, right? As far as being a viable...
Well, it was well underway. We were already beating the AM stations, you know, because in the late 60s, the AM was still king.
Right.
But the FM it reached the counterculture. And then suddenly it started pulling in more than just the counterculture because a lot of my friends who were good Republicans were listening to FM and not AM
But
anymore.
a lot of the cars in the late '60s didn't have FM receivers.
No,
They only had AM receivers.
First car I got with the AM FM was about a brand new 1968 Volkswagen, and I ordered it with a Blaupunkt AM FM radio.
Right.
And
Blaupunkt
from then on, all I've had is AM FMs, and but yet I still to this day I'll listen to AM radio.
Yeah. Because I had a '69 Ford truck that's just got an AM radio.
Just got an AM radio.
That's the stock radio that came with it. You met George Carlin.
Well, I interviewed him in 1989 when I was at the classic rock station KCLQ here in Fresno, and George Carlin was going to be playing a concert, I think at the Soroyan or somewhere, and I met George over the phone, and I interviewed him for about a half an hour. Really, just a brilliant guy. 1980, Sammy Hagar, when I'm a KK DJ doing the afternoon show, and Sammy Hagar came up, and this is when he was making solo albums before he became a part of Van Halen, but he'd already left Montrose. And so,
he had some big hit singles.
Yeah, nice guy. Just a down home great guy.
Was he crazy?
No, not at all. No,
the media portrays him as kind of out there.
No,
but he's not.
He's not. No, good businessman too.
Yeah. Paul Stanley of Kiss.
Well, 1975, we're doing Flo and Eddie by the Fireside with Mark and Howard from the Turtles on KMET on Sunday nights.
Yeah,
and in comes. And they're wearing their concert gear and the big boots, but they're not wearing their white makeup. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley of Kiss, and the first time we'd ever seen them without their makeup. And so they came on and they did an hour of Flo and Eddie by the Fireside with us. Gene Simmons has turned to be quite a businessman, an incredible businessman.
He was the one that really took the marketing to a new level for Kiss as far as just collectibles and things like that. I think he probably makes more money off of the collectibles than he does off the music.
And he's constantly, when he's out on the road, he's constantly putting business deals.
But Kiss is still a big draw.
Oh, it's a huge. They have a huge. My daughter was really into Kiss, and I was friends with the people at Casablanca Records, so they sent me the entire Kiss library to my house, and we had a rule. You can play Kiss all you want when you get home from school, but when Dad gets home, keep it to a dull roar.
It really changed rock and roll. I mean, that's where Kiss and Alice Cooper.
It was theater. It was rock and roll theater.
They brought theater into the concerts, whereas before it was just the music, but then they started telling stories on stage.
But think about this. A bunch of 60-year-old guys putting on white makeup and eye stuff and face paint.
They were in their late 20s.
I know, and they're still doing it, and they're still making money at it. Good for them. But Gene Simmons is quite a businessman.
One of the original members of Kiss died, didn't he?
Yeah. Was it? I don't know if it was Ace Frehley. I'm not sure. I don't want to venture out there because I can't really I just know that one of them died.
Right. Did you meet Alice Cooper?
We talked to Alice.
Vince Fournier.
Vince Fournier. We talked to him on the telephone. He's a big Republican.
Yeah.
He was a Goldwater Republican.
Yeah. I read the book $1 Billion Babies, the paperback that was about Alice Cooper and about the craziness of the concerts and all that.
He called in one night while we're doing Flo and Eddie, and we had him on the phone. So I talked to him on the phone, but I didn't meet him. As I talked to John Lennon on the phone one night.
He's an avid golfer. And he regularly played golf with Groucho Marx.
He and Groucho were pals. They were great
Isn't
pals.
that hilarious?
Yeah, they were pals. Big pals.
Yeah. Who else?
Oh, let me see. I'm trying to think of who else I've met. See, man, I'm drawing a blank. I've met so many people, and I met the guy. Oh yeah, I met the guy for the Dixie Dregs, Steve Morse.
Right, and they put out some really good music.
Yeah, they're great musicians. And T. Lavitz, and Paul Barrere. T. Lavitz was the keyboardist with the Dregs, and Paul Barrere was, of course, Lowell George's sidekick in Little Feat. They had a band called the Blues Busters, and they came to San Luis Obispo in 1986, and we hung out for an afternoon. And also Delbert McClinton. I got to spend a night with Delbert McClinton in San Luis Obispo, and we went up to this club, the Spirit, up on the hill, which is now the KSBY TV studios, south end of San Luis. But that was a nightclub back then.
Right.
And spent a night hanging with Delbert. And Delbert McClinton is a genius, just an incredible genius.
It's been an interesting life for you because you've been in and out. Recently you were unemployed as far as having a radio show. But but you've got some good news.
I got some good news now. We had a meeting the other day, and I'm going to be doing some work with Art Leboe's Coco 94. And it looks like the Rhythm and Blues Chronicles are going to have a new home